got it. I just had to click got it.
Okay. Hello, Sarah, and thank you for agreeing to talk to me.
Oh, thank you, Jackie. It's lovely to talk to you.
Just for people who are watching this who don't know you, Sarah is an amazing singer and songwriter who accompanies herself on guitar and piano and percussion. And she lives about 10 miles away from me in the far west of Cornwall. Sarah has got her roots in folk music, but she moved away from that to writing her own material after her first 2 albums. And she is about to release what is, I think, her 6th album, which is the St. Buryan Sessions this October, although there are a few tempting singles already out there, which, as the title suggests, was recorded in her local church to take advantage of the amazing acoustics. So it was done as a live performance, but without an audience, given lockdown. And I thought I'd let people know that I got to know you. I don't know how many years ago it is now, but I remember the first time I saw you perform was at the Lafrauda Festival.
Oh gosh, I didn't realize
on the Butterfield stage, and I was in tears. It was so beautiful.
Oh.
And I've seen you quite a few times since then. And then obviously you do the mic nights around here, which is really generous, and I've got to know you there. So it'd be great to ask you some questions about your own process and creative life. So I wanted to start by asking you how you made that transition from folk, which is very much about repeating traditional music, to actually doing your own original stuff.
Well, I was always writing songs all along, and even my first album, which is almost all traditional material, has one of my own songs on it. And, you know, I mean, I'd been writing songs since I was 8 years old and sort of doing them in school assemblies and so on. And you know, as I got, you know, a little older, going out and performing them. But I'd always thought of myself as being kind of a folk musician who happened to write an occasional song. And I never kind of set out to write songs. I never kind of thought, right, I want to sit down and write a song now, you know, just every now and again, a song would come to me, you know, and I would write it. But I never looked for them. And then really what happened, what made the difference was moving to Cornwall and meeting my lovely friend Zoe, who I made the Mama album with. And Zoe, of course, is, you know, a famous former pop star who had this massive hit single with Sunshine on a Rainy Day back in the early 1990s. And she and I got to be friends because our kids were going to the same tiny little school. So we were friends as mums before we were friends as musicians. And she was at my house one time and she said, oh, let me play you this song I've been writing. And she was sitting at my kitchen table and she played this song and sang it. And I said, oh, that's beautiful, but I couldn't really understand the words you were singing. Could you write them down for me? And she said, well, you didn't understand the words because there aren't any words. I was just singing nonsense syllables. You know, that's what I do. You know, when I can't think of any words, I just sing whatever. And I said, well, gosh, would you like some words? And she said, oh, could you write some words? Oh, that would be fantastic. Here, I'll record the song for you and you can write some words for it. And so I wrote some words and she liked them, and then she suggested changes. And then I said, you know, actually the melody is kind of straight. How about if we put a bridge in there? And we found ourselves co-writing a song. And we were both really happy with what we came up with. And I think I was just about to head out on tour at the time. And she made this little homemade CD for me with all these just fragment songs. And some of them were just, you know, just a couple of lines, and some she'd have a few words or an idea, but she wouldn't really have that much of a melody, and others she'd have quite a complete melody and no words. So, you know, she'd put down all her ideas for me on the CD, and I went off on tour and I was just listening to this CD of all her ideas and working on them, and things were coming to mind. And when I came back, we sat down together and we hammered out a whole bunch of songs. And it was really a completely collaborative process where, you know, it wasn't like she just wrote the melodies and I wrote the majority of the words and she wrote the majority of the melodies, but we both contributed on both sides. And we wound up making an album together of songs that we had co-written under the band name Mama. And it was working with Zoe that really made me realize, how much I enjoyed songwriting, how much I loved the process of making a song, and and going from that sort of vague concept to an actual fully fledged song. And I never realized before that how much I loved it, and because I didn't do it that often, and I do it and I go, oh, that was nice, and then I'd have other stuff to do, and I might not write another song for a year. Whereas sitting down with Zoe, I think it was over a 2-month period that we wrote a whole album's worth of songs together. Really, that kind of focused work really convinced me that it was something I enjoyed doing. And then the fact that somebody as illustrious as Zoe, who not only had, she didn't just have that one hit, she had she made several really critically acclaimed albums and has also written with and for lots of other writers and performers. So she's not just a flash in the pan, she's a serious talent who really, really, really knows her stuff. I mean, I learned so much about songwriting from her. And I thought, well, if somebody like that wants to work with me, and actually thinks I have something to offer and wants to write songs with me, well, maybe this is what I should really be doing. And at that point, this is going to be a really long answer to a short question, but at that point, I'd already started recording what would be my third album, The Plum Tree and the Rosary. So my first album just had one of my own songs on it and the rest folk. Second album, 2 of my own songs and the rest folk. Third album, I was gonna have, a few songs and the rest folk. But having been working with Zoe, I found myself actually thinking about songs for myself. And I started writing a whole lot of songs. And even though I'd recorded what I thought was the full album, I decided to go back into the studio again a year on from the first recording session for that album and record a bunch more material that was all original, and add that I thought still worked with some of the folk material that I'd already recorded. So I wound up jettisoning, just ditching a lot of what I'd already recorded so that I could make room for more original songs. But I'm still really happy with that album. And from that point onward, I think my album started emphasizing the original material more, although I always still like to have at least one song I didn't write, if not 2, on all of my albums, because I think it's important not to just be wrapped up in your own thing, just to also see what you can bring to other people's material. So that's it.
Because I knew about that collaboration, but I didn't realize that had been the starting point. That's really interesting.
It really was such a major thing for me. I mean, if I don't honestly know whether I'd be doing what I'm doing now if I hadn't moved to Cornwall and met Zoe. I just owe her so much,
Yeah, being believed in is such a massive thing, isn't it?
It is. It's huge. It's huge. I mean, I remember when you first came to one of the sessions that I was running. I can't remember whether it was Out of the Blue or the Blue Anchor or the King's Arms, but you came along to one of those sessions and you were quite nervous and shy, and you weren't sure you were going to do one of your songs. And I was like, yeah, no, do it. And I was blown away by your song, and I just thought it was so lovely. And I said, please keep writing, And I remember I went to see you were performing on the street outside. I think was it part of La Frauda? It was kind of the Fringe, and you had a little just a mic set up on the pavement in St. Just there, and you were doing all these songs, and it was like, wow, this woman has a body of work, these are really good. And I remember saying to you, and you were quite diffident about it, and you weren't really sure whether you wanted to put the songs out there. So I hope I helped too.
I mean, the last song was, I think, which is your song, of course, was I think that was one of the first songs I learned to play.
Oh, that's lovely.
So yeah. So would you describe your writing process to us? Do you have a routine? How do you go about it?
Okay, I've developed a routine over the last few albums, which, so it used to be back when I was first writing, you know, with first three albums, really, I kind of, songs would come to me and then I would sit down and write them. And then sometimes they would change over time. There was one of the title track for The Plum Tree and the Rose. I wrote that song in quite a different form and actually went out and played it on a few tours, and it just didn't seem to be quite working as a song. And I thought, right, okay, maybe that one's going to have to go. And then I revisited it about a year after I abandoned it. I was driving to a gig, and I started singing it with a completely different rhythm and a completely different melody as an a cappella song. So it was the same, pretty much the same words, but from being this quite upbeat, strong with song with guitar, sort of strummed guitar backing, it became an a cappella song initially, and quite slow. And then so I did it that night, actually, as an a cappella song, because I was so excited about it, and it got a really good reaction. And I was all set. I was going to record it as an a cappella song, and then it was about a few months again after that. I had some time off. I was on tour in the Netherlands, and I was sitting in this lady's kitchen and noodling on the guitar, and I wrote kind of a little instrumental guitar piece, quite slow and classical sounding. And I thought, you know, actually that would sound really nice as an intro to The Plum Tree and the Rose, you know. And initially I thought of doing that guitar intro and then singing it a cappella. And I thought, you know, actually, even though it can work as an a cappella song, it might be quite nice just with very slow guitar bits here and there, kind of not kind of accompanying it rhythmically, but just adding little touches behind the song. And so that's how I did that one. And so that went on The Plum Tree and the Rose. And I mean, all of the songs on that album had quite a long evolution, in part because it was such a long process. You know, it was a 2-year recording process, of going back in after I'd been doing the work with Zoe and rejigging the whole thing and rethinking it. And then when I came to do my fourth album, Walking into White, at that point I'd started really touring heavily and you know, being out on the road about 6 months of the year. And I kept getting ideas for songs and thinking, right, I better jot that down. And I'd either do a voice, if it was a melodic or instrumental idea, I'd do a voice memo on my phone, you know, just record it. Or else if it was a lyric idea for lyrics, I'd write them down. But because I was so busy, I didn't have time to flesh out and finish the songs, but they were always floating around in my head. And sometimes, you know, a lyric that I'd started writing several months before, I'd think, oh, you know what? I know what the second verse could be. And I'd go back and find the note that I'd made about the start of that song and add the second verse. And then once I'd actually booked the studio time to record that album, that's when I sat down with all of my notes and thought, right, okay, let's flesh all these out into finished songs. And, you know, some songs I would start working on and go, yeah, you know, that's not working. And some songs I actually finished and then decided they didn't fit with the rest of the album. But at the end of this sort of 3 months of really intensive just writing every day, I had what I thought was an album that actually really held together as an album. And in fact, I was so happy with how it worked as kind of a song cycle, if that's not too grandiose a term, that the first year or so that I was going out with that album and touring it, I would perform the album live start to finish as the first half of every gig, and then you know, come back in the second half and do other stuff. And that was great, and I really enjoyed doing that. So, and I was really happy with how that process worked out, because I felt like, in a way, all of the songs kind of had their proper gestation by virtue of having been left to kind of ferment. I'm mixing my metaphors here, but for a long time, you know. And so when I did my fifth album, If We Dig Any Deeper, It Could Get Dangerous, I kind of deliberately did that. And I just wrote down song ideas and didn't, you know, sort of avoided fleshing them out into finished songs until it was a few months before we were due to record the album. And I thought, right, okay, now is the time. And I think as well, your brain ticks away on things. Like if you know you haven't, I find a lot of the time, it always worked out this way for me in school. If I knew I had an essay due, I wouldn't start work on it, but it would always be kind of going round and round in the back of my head. And so by the time I sat down to actually do it, I could nearly write the whole thing start to finish without having to go through the process of writing an outline, because the outline would have been taking shape in my head. And I think that happens with songs too. And it's still happening. I didn't write any new material for the St. Buryan sessions because I already had, well, more than a full album's worth. I already had 15 songs, two that were new ones that I hadn't recorded before that other people wrote, and 13 songs that I'd recorded on previous albums, but that I felt had changed and grown and developed so much that I really wanted to do them live, and casting them in a slightly different light. And, you know, and some of them had new parts added to them and things like that. So, you know, they had all grown and developed quite a bit. So it was really nice to be able to revisit all that past material. But I'm also writing material for, I don't know if I'm going to do another album right away, or what I'm thinking I might do, because I have stuff that I've been working on for a long time now. I mean, I just yesterday wrote a bunch of new lyrics for a song that's been kind of gestating for about 2 years now, you know. So yeah, because I've been accumulating stuff since 2018, since 2017 really was when I recorded the last studio album, and of original material, and or of new original material. So I've been accumulating stuff for a few years now. So I'm thinking what I might do is do a little series of EPs, because I can't put out another album for another few years at least. You know, when you've done one album, you can't just bring out another album, other people get sick of you. But I thought if I could do like an EP with maybe three new songs or something, or and then maybe do another one a year down the line, and another one, then eventually I'd have a series of EPs that could form an album in themselves, or some kind of cute little box set or something. So that's where I'm thinking at the moment. But I am still using that same process of kind of letting the songs evolve very slowly over time. And then when I get ready to record what'll probably be just a short EP, I'll sit down and finish them so they work together.
I'm fascinated by that. I can't believe that you would book studio time not knowing that the songs were finished. And trust that they'll just all come together. That's really fascinating.
Yeah, well, I think I was a journalist for years, you see.
Okay.
And I never wrote anything until I had a deadline.
Okay.
and I used to write reviews. I used to write live reviews of theater and concerts that were for a daily paper, and so they had to be written on the night. I would go to, you know, a concert or a play knowing that I had to have a finished review of it sent in. I think my deadline was midnight. It had to be in by midnight to be in the next day's paper. And so I got quite used to working under that level of pressure. And it's, I think to some extent, I almost need the pressure to put out the work. But I think, yeah, I think having that little element of pressure helps, I think, you know, it kind of forces you to be a little bit more ruthless than maybe you would be otherwise. And to go, yeah, no, this isn't working. let's cut this short and let's move on to the next song now, or, or yeah, that it just forces you to work in I think a better and more efficient way that maybe gives you a better finished product. And then also the other thing I should mention is that I've always worked with producers, and nearly every song I've recorded has changed to some extent in the studio when I'm in the process of recording it, from suggestions that the producers make, whether they say, you know what, that verse, we don't need that verse in the song and it makes the song too long, so let's get rid of that verse, or how about if you hold that note a little longer, or how about you change that line to something else. And that really helps. I think again, from long experience as a journalist, I know everybody needs editing, and you can't get too attached and too precious to your own material. You have to be willing to let somebody else, sometimes other people can see stuff that you can't see, that you're blind to, because it's your own creation. So you have to be willing to take feedback and rework things. And I think they almost invariably come out for the better when you do that.
I suppose maybe it's a case of just knowing yourself and your own process, because I think for me, when I rush something to finish it, then the line gets drawn and it's finished, whereas if I'd kept at it, there would be refinements that would become clear. But
I think sorry.
Yeah, go on.
Well, I think part of it is, for me though, is that I've always had that like 2 or 3 year unconscious revision going on.
Okay.
Where my brain is working away on the song without me really thinking about it.
Okay.
And I think that's always been important for me. And I think, sorry?
It's birthed fully formed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I think that's kind of what used to happen with my reviews too, because I think, in fact, when I stopped being a journalist and stopped writing reviews, it took me a really long time to be able to go to a concert and just sit and enjoy it and take it in without my brain just automatically putting together phrases and ticking over and going, okay, this is what we're going to say. This is how we're going to phrase the review. We're going to start by talking about this. And we're going to, the brain would just be working away in the background, even though I didn't have to write a review, but it would just automatically kick into gear and start working away on the problem of how to write about the whatever I was seeing and hearing. And albums too, I used to do album reviews, and it took me ages to be able to listen to an album without writing a review of it in my head.
Yeah, occupational hazards die hard.
Yeah.
How do you keep up your creative flow? Do you have any techniques, or does it just spontaneously come?
I pretty much let it spontaneously come, and I don't worry too much if it doesn't come for a long time. I think everybody, like the whole lockdown thing, everybody reacted differently to it. And some people had big creative bursts and wrote tons of new stuff. And a lot of musicians I know, and I fall into this category, found that they just didn't write anything. Just the creative element just wasn't there. And I think, in my case anyway, I think a lot of it might have been that I needed the performance element to spark the creative element. Right. That when I was just sitting at home, nothing was coming to me, no song ideas. But since I've been starting to get out gigging again, I've been coming up with ideas. And again, it's all like just the other week, I did that lovely gig at the Rosewood Arts Festival out near Pindine. And while I was sound checking, as so often used to happen back in my touring days, and I hope will still happen, but it seems to be, when I was in the middle of the sound check, I suddenly got an idea for a melody, and I had to grab my phone and go, hang on, I just need to record this, and recorded this bit of melody, which I'm sure will be part of a song at some point. So I think you have to trust, that that the creativity will come back even if it goes away for a while, you know. And sometimes you can have fallow periods, but I prefer not to kind of push it. I know, again, some people like all those brill building songwriters, people like Carole King and some great songwriters had a thing where they just went into an office and sat down and wrote songs, you know. And it must be a really good way to work because so many great songs have come out of that process. But to date, that hasn't been a way I've been able to work, in part because I've always got so much else, because I'm kind of, you know, constantly, I've always got stuff to do, even when I'm not writing songs. I've got to work on the website. I've got to try and book gigs, which is something I really need to do. There's, with my new album, there's all this endless admin stuff that I've had to do with just the mechanics of bringing the album out. I spent all day yesterday in the laborious process of uploading it to my distributor's website. I had to, you know, every song had to be individually uploaded, and all the, you know, information and metadata and the writers and the credits and everything like that, and the length, track length, and the ISRC code, every song, you know. So there's so much that you have to be doing, that there's plenty to be getting on with even when you're not writing.
Yeah. It sounds like you alternate between, because you do a lot of performing, don't you? It sounds like you alternate performing and the ideas all gather in, and then you do a brill building style where you just get it all out.
Yeah, that's what I've done for the last 2 albums, and I feel like they're really strong albums, you know. So I feel like that's clearly a good way to work for me. You know, I'm not saying it's necessarily the way everybody should work, but for my own idiosyncrasies, you know, that seems to work really nicely, where I can just, I mean, I find a lot of my work is like that. If I can focus on a project, if I can set myself a task in advance where I'm going to have to focus on a project, like grant applications. A lot of what I've been doing over the last year has been writing grant applications, and I've had some wonderful grants come in, like my Arts Council Developing Your Creative Practice grant, which got me composition lessons, which was fantastic. So I actually got to get some actual tutoring in music composition, which is something I had never studied formally. And I'm sure that's going to inform my songwriting too. I'm sure that's going to be a big help. But, you know, writing the grant application for that, it's like writing a book. It's a big, long document that you have to put together. So I would go, right, I'm scheduling in 2 days next week to write that grant application. You know, and it's got to get done in those 2 days. But again, it's like the brain is, once you know that's coming, your brain is kind of unconsciously preparing itself and getting all your ducks in a row. So then you can sit down and just focus on the task, turn off the internet, focus on the task with blinkers on, and not look at emails and not look at anything until that's done. Brilliant. And then go on to the next thing. Brilliant. Distraction is my enemy.
Okay, my last question was just to ask you if you had any particular resources or advice that has helped you particularly, and that you would share with people who are aspiring to write or to write songs.
I think the big thing that Zoe taught me is, don't think that any topic or any structure or any, you know, way of any rhyme scheme, nothing's out of bounds. A song can be about absolutely anything, and it can have whatever structure you want, as long as there's a structure. It does not have to have, you know, 2 verses, a chorus, and a middle 8. You know, it can be anything. It can just be a linear structure, or it can be kind of a pattern that alternates between different rhythms and things. You know, it could, any structure will do, as long as there's a structure. And you know, and the words, you might have quite a close, complicated rhyme scheme, or you might have a vague rhyme scheme, or words might not rhyme at all. You know, some songs hardly have any rhyme in them, and because the words are so strong and the rhythms are so strong, you still think of them as being, you know, a song and a poem. So I think don't declare anything out of bounds, you know. Let yourself be open to absolutely anything. And if a song seems to be developing in a given way, don't go, oh, well, that's not going to work. Oh, I can't do that. Don't ever think I can't do that. You can do absolutely anything. It's all out there.
Brilliant. Well, that's a lovely sentiment to end on.
Oh, thank you.
Anything. Thank you so much for talking to us, Sarah.
Thank you, Jackie. It's lovely to talk to you.